Okay, tonight's class is sponsored by the Meisel family. Tonight is Bar Meisel's yahrzeit, those that remember him. Dalet Tishrei was his yahrzeit. So the Shami should have an aliyah. So tonight's class is... Okay, so before we go back to Sukkot, that's where we're up to now already in learning it by Sukkot, I just want to mention two things about Aser Shemei Tshuva. First of all, for the rest of Aser Shemei Tshuva, with a few exceptions, at Shachris and Mincha we say Avinu Malkeinu, the long Avinu Malkeinu. Now, before that, you have to make sure to say all the additions for Aser Shemei Tshuva. Zachreinu L'chaim Micha. The only one that really matters, if you said Hakel HaKodesh instead of Hamelach HaKodesh, you have to repeat the Yishmon Esrei, the Amidah. If you don't remember what you say, again you have to repeat the Shema. If you don't remember if you said it, we assume you didn't. You said what you're accustomed to saying. All the other things, really you don't have to repeat. Except it says in Shchonor that if you said Melech Yisrael Mishpat, you just say the word Melech. So it says in halacha that it's preferred to do what's called Tfilas Nedava, just a gift davening. But many poskim say today we don't do that because tefillas and dava, every word has to have kavanah. If you don't have proper kavanah, it's all brachas levatola. So rather than sin with a lot of brachas levatola, we just don't, generally speaking, we don't do tefillas and dava. Another interesting thing about Avinu Malkeinu, which became a Chabad minig in Tafshin Lamed Hey in 1974, Vav Tishrei in fact it was. In halacha, there's two things. There's Avinu Malkeinu and there's Tachnun. So even if you don't say Tachnun, you still say Avinu Malkeinu. In Shchonarach, even Al Rebbe Shchonarach says that. But what happened in Tavshin Lamed Hey, I remember the incident when it happened. The Rebbe was davening for the Yomid Vav Tishrei at yahrzeit for his mother. The Rebbe was davening for the Yomid. And they gave the Rebbe a piece of paper that there's a bris that day. And there was a sandik in the shul or the father of the baby, whatever it was. So everybody expected that after the repetition, the Rebbe will skip Tachnun but go to Avinu Malkeinu. Instead, what the Rebbe did was he skipped Tachnun and Avinu Malkeinu. Afterwards, he went straight from the repetition. He said Chotzi Kaddish, and he went to I don't remember which day of the week it was, but whatever. Straight, he didn't say Avinu Malkeinu. That night at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe explained. It was a big chiddush in Chabad. It was never done before. But the Rebbe said, he based it on the Alter Rebbe's Siddur, that from the Alter Rebbe implies very strongly that Avinu Malkeinu is connected to Tachnun. So therefore, anytime you don't say Tachnun, you don't say Avinu Malkeinu. Generally speaking, like Erev Shabbos to Mincha, nobody says Avinu Malkeinu. But what happens, I'll give you another example. In Shchonarach it says Erev Yom Kippur, you don't say Tachnun Erev Yom Kippur. But some people say Avinu Malkeinu, some people don't say Avinu Malkeinu. Some people, if Shabbos is Yom Kippur, so they'll say Avinu Malkeinu, Erev Yom Kippur, Shachris time. All the different opinions. But according to the Rebbe's Chiddush, which obviously since then that's what we do, according to the Rebbe's Chiddush, the Rebbe connected it to Keller Chapayim, that we say right before Vayib and Seyah. Any day there's no Tachnun, you don't say Keller Chapayim, you don't say the long Avinu Malkeinu. And the Rebbe showed, according to the Rebbe's Loshin in the Siddur, that it's all connected to each other. So bottom line is, if there's a bris or a chosin or whatever, anytime there wouldn't be any Tachnun, you wouldn't say Avinu Malkeinu. Therefore, our custom is Erev Yom Kippur, when we don't say Tachnun, we don't say Avinu Malkeinu either.
When we say Shir HaMalos right before Baruch, do we say it with the Erev Kodesh open?
No, Shir HaMalos, our custom is not to say it with it open. And in fact, there's a lot of things that we do here. It's not a major issue. In Chabad, we don't say Shir HaMalos pasuk by pasuk. Here we do, because that's what people are used to. In the middle of Avinu Malkeinu in Chabad, you don't say all those Hachzei Metshuva. We don't all do that either. But there's nothing wrong doing it. Chabad didn't do a lot of things that Chabad now does. It doesn't mean anything. It's not changing a custom of Chabad. But we don't open Dor and Kaddish. Even Rosh Hashanah night of David Mizbar, the Welt also opens Dor and Kaddish. That's a big money thing. They sell it a lot of money. And they also don't say it pasuk by pasuk. But I mean, here in the show, we say, but because who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter, it's not against the min in Chabad. Okay, that's as far as Aser Simei Tshuva. Another thing, keep in mind that this week is called Shabbos Shuvah, the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So, just another point about Aser Simei Tshuva. The Baal Shem Tov from the Rabbeim is brought down that Chai Elul to Rosh Hashanah is 12 days. So Chai Elul is tshuva for the previous Tishrei, 19th is for previous Cheshvan. You know, the 12 days correspond with the previous month. The Arizal writes that 7 days of Aser Simei Tshuva, because there's Aser Simei Tshuva, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, 1 day Yom Kippur. So the week of Aser Simei Tshuva, you have a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. They might not be in the right order, but so it says the Marshal today is Thursday. Today was supposed to be Tshuva for all the Thursdays of the previous year. Tomorrow is Friday, Tshuva all the Fridays of the previous year, and so on. And Shabbos is Shabbos Tshuva itself. Okay, that's as far as it. Kiddush Tovanim B'chol we don't do until Metzoi Yom Kippur. Okay, going back to where we left off at Sukkot. So the last thing we were learning about Sukkot was that you prepare the lulav and esrog. Our custom is in the sukkah, and we explained then how it's done and so on and so forth. People have to make sure, by the way, that you don't leave things for the last minute, because sometimes you leave things for the last minute, then you get messed up. Let's say people have a sukkah, okay? So Yom Tov you're allowed to carry. So there's not a problem carrying from the house to the sukkah. But what happens if you live in a place where there's no Eidov, or you don't go by the Eidov? So you have to make sure that you're going to be able to carry from the house to the sukkah and the sukkah to the house. Because if not, how in the world are you going to get your food out to the sukkah? So you have to make sure that you make a mini Eidov, whatever it is. I mean, just have to, people have to think about it. It's not 10 minutes before Shabbos, what do I do? Because that's what happens. I can testify that that's what happens. 10 minutes before, what do? I don't have an Erev, what am I supposed to do? Okay. But so people should think about it before and just make sure that if either you go by Erev or you don't go by an Erev, that at least you'll be able to, or in a place where there's no Erev, that you're able to carry from the house into the sukkah. Okay, okay, so we let Lich mention.
On Shabbat, probably.
What?
Just for Shabbat.
Just for Shabbat. Yom Tov you can carry. I mean, you can't just carry on Yom Tov. You can carry on Yom Tov those things that you need for Yom Tov. Yeah, you just can't carry because you want to carry. It has to be tzarech Yom Tov for them, or for food or whatever it is. Okay, so now coming into the night of Sukkot. Okay, so he's learned you're supposed to give extra tzedakah. It says in halacha in Erev Sukkot, you're supposed to have the sukkah already, make sure the lights are on and everything is ready to go for Yom Tov. Because not you have to go look for a guy, and in many neighborhoods it's hard to find a guy. Like in this neighborhood it's hard to find a guy. Everybody's Jewish. Okay, so now when it comes to the Yom Tov of Sukkot, so it's a very interesting halacha. Normally Shabbos, Yom Tov you're allowed to bring in earlier. Okay? Because you can add to Kedusha. The only time you cannot bring Yom Tov in early is the Yom Tov of Shavuos, because then you're taking away from the completeness of the 49th day of the Omer. But technically Sukkot, you could bring Sukkot in early. But as far as eating the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah, you cannot, I mean you could eat in the sukkah, but you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah, and you cannot make a bracha leisha b'sukkah until it's definitely night. So you have to mamish wait until Tzeisek Kechavim, that you can figure approximately an hour after candle lighting time, which would be Tzeisek Kechavim. Before that you can't have a meal in the sukkah because you're not going to be yet to the mitzvah of sukkah. Where do we learn this out from? It's interesting. There's the Yom Tov of Sukkot is b'chamisha asar, on the 15th. The Yom Tov Pesach is on the 15th. So the Gemara learns out what's called Gzeira Shava. By Sukkot it says Chamisha Asar. By Pesach it says Chamisha Asar. So there's a lot of dinim we learn out from Pesach to Sukkot and Sukkot to Pesach. One of the dinim the Gemara learns out is by Pesach it says V'ichlu Samatzah Balayla. you have to eat the matzah at night. So the Gemara learns out, just like matzah you have to eat at night, so sitting in the sukkah also has to be done at night. In fact, the Gemara asks, if that's the case, then on Pesach we should sit in the sukkah, and on Sukkot we should eat matzah. If we're likening Sukkot to Pesach, then they should liken it completely. Pesach we should sit in the sukkah, and in Sukkot we have, yeah.
Can you eat matzah all year round?
Sure.
No, it's delicious. You make a breakfast.
Except
Erev Pesach is the only time where halachically it's forbidden to eat matzah. Some people have a minhag from Purim, some people have a minhag from Rosh Chodesh. Our minhag is from Purim, we don't eat it. That's a custom. Halacha, the Gemara said very sharp expressions about somebody who eats matzah on Erev Pesach. But that again is kosher lePesach matzah. Chametz v'ka matzah is not matzah. It doesn't fall into that category of a problem. Okay, so when you make Kiddush, so there's a difference in order between the first night of Pesach, Sukkot, and the second night of Sukkot. Okay, another thing about the Sukkah before we go into the dinim, Sukkah has to be treated with a lot of respect. So therefore it says you're not allowed to bring, let's say, a garbage can into the Sukkah. It's very practical. You finish eating, you want to clear off the table, the easiest thing, bring a garbage can in, just, throw everything straight into the garbage. So in Shulchan Aruch it says you're not allowed to, a garbage can with a cover is a garbage can. It could be it could be a gold garbage can made out of gold. It's still a garbage can. Okay. So what?
A plastic garbage bag has never been used for anything.
Again, you don't, garbage bag, they're more makel because a garbage bag is not as disgusting as a garbage can. A garbage can is a garbage can. A garbage bag is a bag.
It's a brand new bag.
Yeah, so people are much more makel with bringing garbage bags into the sukkah than a garbage can. But a garbage can, not only that, it says you shouldn't bring dirty pots and pans into the sukkah, things like that, even to serve from, because it's just not respectful to the sukkah. Sukkah is so holy that the Mittel Rebbe said, again, Chabad has a minhag that we don't drink water out of sukkah, even at Shmini Atzeres, even if it's pouring rain. Not California rain, a pouring rain. We will not drink even water outside of a sukkah. Yet sleeping, then Shulchan Aruch says, and the Gemara says there's an obligation to sleep in the sukkah. So Chabad Dafka does not sleep in the sukkah. So the Mittel Rebbe said, the Rebbe's son said, how can you sleep in Makifim Debina? It says in Kabbalah that sukkah is a level of Makifim of Bina, which is a very, very lofty level. So he says, how can you sleep in Makifim Debina? So the Rebbe once spoke about it, and the Rebbe said, we don't feel it. So what's the word? The Rebbe says like this. It says in Shulchan Aruch that nowadays they're also lenient in sleeping in the sukkah because people are not comfortable today in the sukkah. They need their beds, they need their pillows, and therefore, your mitzayir, a person who's suffering, doesn't have to eat in the sukkah. But the Rebbe says, so because the Mittel Rebbe said, how can you sleep in Makif and Debina? So therefore we don't sleep in the sukkah because how can you sleep? You're painful when the Mittel Rebbe said you can't sleep in the sukkah. So he said, what happens if you don't feel it? I remember when the Rebbe said the Sikha. Why you don't feel it? So the Rebbe said, then you're in pain that you don't feel it. And if you don't feel that you're in, you don't feel that you're in pain that you don't even feel whatever it is. So bottom line in Chabad, we dafka don't sleep in the sukkah. Many from people do. In Chabad, the custom is dafka not to sleep in the sukkah. But at the same time, we will never eat or drink anything, even if somebody brought down the Rebbe to Shab, and he had to take pills, medical pills. He wouldn't take it in the house. Even though he tried a drop of water, he went out to the sukkah. And even, we mentioned this many times, when the Rebbe had his stroke, Shmini Atzeres night, in the middle of our coffee, the Rebbe had a heart attack. The Rebbe had a big heart attack. He had another one or two later that night. So they wanted the Rebbe finished our coffee, and then he went up to his room. So the doctors were there. He said, drink orange juice, this and that. So he said, have to make Kiddush. Can't eat before Kiddush Shmini Atzeres. So they brought the Rebbe grape juice. So the Rebbe said, you don't make Kiddush in grape juice, you make Kiddush in wine. The Rebbe didn't like Kiddush in grape juice. Halachic, because it's allowed, but the Rebbe wanted Kiddush and wine. So he said, the wine, he brought him wine. So he said, okay, but I have to go in the sukkah. Can't make Kiddush out of a sukkah. So I remember, I was there, the Rebbe went out to the sukkah and he made Kiddush and wine. Anyway, that's the story. Machat Shinus Lamaisam Marabevo Ma'inkim Shivala Galtedo, and then